Hey there, welcome to Bread Arrows. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. If these stories give you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get cozy and let the fear take over. La Villa Carré restaurant occupies a historic Creole townhouse in New Orleans' French Quarter. Its copper pots and wood-burning ovens having served distinguished diners since 1842. As executive chef, I've learned our most experienced cuisinier hasn't physically tasted a sauce since 1895. Pierre Lacroix, who once cooked for New Orleans aristocracy, continues to perfect our dishes from beyond. The first signs of Pierre's presence appeared during crucial dinner service. Sauces would adjust themselves to perfect consistency. Soufflés would rise at exactly the right moment, and spice blends would mysteriously achieve ideal balance. Most remarkably, troubled dishes would correct themselves mid-preparation, showing evidence of techniques that hadn't been used since the Belle Epoque. Research through restaurant records revealed that Pierre had been more than just a chef. He was a culinary pioneer who combined French classical techniques with Creole ingredients. He died in his kitchen during a Mardi Gras celebration, completing the recipe for a revolutionary gumbo. His last words were instructions about proper roux preparation. Pierre seems most active during elaborate dinner services. He has an uncanny ability to predict cooking problems, often preventing kitchen disasters before they occur. Sometimes we find notes scratched in French script on old menu boards, offering advice about specific dishes that matches century-old techniques perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during preparation of classical Creole dishes. Modern chefs report feeling invisible hands adjusting their knife work, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost recipes have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously written on old kitchen ledgers. He takes particular interest in teaching young chefs, especially those learning traditional French Creole methods. Apprentices often report dreams of being instructed by a distinguished chef in 19th century whites, learning techniques that combine old-world precision with New Orleans soul. Some have found their dishes mysteriously improved overnight, with refinements that match Pierre's documented style. During one memorable Mardi Gras crisis, we were struggling with an unusually complex banquet menu. That night, security cameras captured footage of Pierre's translucent form moving through the kitchen, adjusting seasonings and demonstrating proper technique. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in French and English, leading to a perfect service. Pierre's presence extends beyond cooking. He's known to maintain the restaurant's cultural integrity, often preventing changes that would compromise traditional methods. During ingredient shortages, certain dishes somehow maintain perfect authenticity, benefiting from ancient substitution techniques that appear mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of Pierre's journals hidden throughout the kitchen, each containing valuable insights about combining French and Creole cuisines. His detailed notes about local ingredient adaptation have proved remarkably relevant to modern sustainability challenges. Modern culinary students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary techniques. Pierre's presence reminds us that cooking is more than just recipe following. It's about maintaining connections between culture, craft, and community across generations. The restaurant has embraced its unusual chef de cuisine. During crucial moments in service, we often find traditional tools laid out in specific patterns, or test dishes mysteriously prepared for the next day's menu planning. When food critics praise our unusually authentic Creole character, we simply credit our traditional methods. Pierre seems particularly protective of our oldest recipes, brought from his native France and adapted to Louisiana. He often appears during their preparation, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised the dish's traditional character. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new recipes that appear in our kitchen books, traditional French Creole dishes adapted for modern dietary needs, but still maintaining their historical essence. These recipes, which seem to write themselves in his flowing hand, show how he helps us adapt classical cuisine for contemporary tastes while preserving its timeless principles. Now, when diners marvel at our unique combination of French refinement and Creole soul, or praise our ability to maintain historical authenticity while meeting modern preferences, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these culinary traditions than someone who has been perfecting them for over a century? The Stormont, a three-masted clipper ship turned museum, rocks gently at her berth in Boston Harbor, her wooden decks still bearing the marks of voyages around Cape Horn. As museum curator, I've discovered our most knowledgeable guide hasn't physically walked these decks since 1878. Captain James Stormont, who once sailed this ship through the world's most treacherous waters, continues to maintain his command from beyond. The first signs of Captain Stormont's presence appeared during restoration work. Ropes would mysteriously recoil themselves in perfect sailor's coils. Brass fittings would shine as if freshly polished, and the ship's compass would swing wildly before pointing to long-forgotten harbors. Most remarkably, during storms, the ship's lines would adjust themselves to prevent damage, showing evidence of seamanship that hadn't been used since the age of sail. Research through maritime records revealed that Stormont had been more than just a captain. He was a legendary navigator who combined traditional sailing knowledge with innovative techniques. He died at his helm during a fierce nor'easter, completing entries in his logbook about a new route to China. His last words were instructions about proper sail trimming. The captain seems most active during severe weather. He has an uncanny ability to predict approaching storms, often securing loose items before the wind rises. Sometimes we find notes scratched in nautical script on old charts, offering advice about weather patterns that matches 19th century sailing logs perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during educational demonstrations. Modern sailors report feeling invisible hands guiding them through traditional knot tying, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost navigation methods have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously marked on old sea charts. He takes particular interest in teaching young maritime enthusiasts, especially those learning traditional sailing methods. Students often report dreams of being instructed by a distinguished captain in period uniform, learning techniques that combine old-world seamanship with modern understanding. Some have found their practice knots mysteriously corrected overnight, with improvements that match Stormont's documented methods. During one memorable winter storm, we were struggling to protect the ship from unusually high winds. That night, security cameras captured footage of Stormont's translucent form moving across the decks, adjusting lines and demonstrating proper storm preparation. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in his hand, leading to improved protection protocols. Stormont's presence extends beyond basic seamanship. He's known to maintain the ship's historical accuracy, often preventing changes that would compromise her authentic character. During guided tour, certain areas of the ship somehow maintain perfect period atmosphere, benefiting from historical details that appear mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of Stormont's logbooks hidden throughout the ship, each containing valuable insights about 19th century navigation. His detailed notes about ocean currents and wind patterns have proved remarkably relevant to modern climate research. Modern maritime students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary seamanship. Stormont's presence reminds us that sailing is more than just transportation. It's about maintaining connections between humanity and the sea across generations. The museum has embraced its unusual captain. During educational programs, we often find traditional navigation tools laid out in specific patterns, or demonstration rigging mysteriously prepared for the next day's lessons. When visitors praise our unusually immersive historical experience, we simply credit our traditional methods. Stormont seems particularly protective of the original features he knew in life. He often appears during maintenance work, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised the ship's authentic character. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new entries that appear in the ship's modern logbook, traditional observations, adapted for contemporary educational purposes, but still maintaining their historical perspective. These entries, which seem to write themselves in his flowing hand, show how he helps us connect modern visitors with maritime history while preserving its timeless principles. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of historical accuracy and educational engagement, or praise our ability to maintain authentic seafaring traditions while meeting modern museum standards, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide this floating time capsule than someone who has been sailing her for over a century? The Philadelphia Historical Society archives occupy a Victorian brownstone in the city's oldest district. Its climate-controlled vaults protecting documents that trace America's founding. As head archivist, I've learned our most dedicated curator hasn't physically handled a document since 1924. Margaret Pierce, who once preserved records of the Revolution, continues her meticulous work from beyond. The first signs of Margaret's presence appeared during delicate restoration projects. Fragile papers would mysteriously stabilize themselves. Acid-damaged documents would show unexpected improvement, and lost files would suddenly appear in perfectly logical locations. Most remarkably, endangered materials would move themselves to safer storage conditions, showing evidence of preservation techniques that hadn't been used since the Jazz Age. Research through personnel records revealed that Margaret had been more than just an archivist. She was a pioneering conservator who combined traditional preservation methods with scientific innovation. She died at her desk during a winter storm, completing the cataloging of Revolutionary War correspondence. Her last words were instructions about proper document storage conditions. Margaret seems most active during critical preservation work. She has an uncanny ability to identify at-risk materials, often preventing deterioration before it becomes visible. Sometimes we find notes written in precise script on catalog cards, offering advice about specific collections that matches century-old conservation manuals perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during work with the oldest documents. Modern archivists report feeling invisible hands guiding their conservation work, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost historical documents have been rediscovered through her intervention, appearing mysteriously filed in overlooked storage areas. She takes particular interest in training young archivists, especially those learning traditional preservation methods. Students often report dreams of being instructed by a distinguished woman in Victorian dress, learning techniques that combine classical conservation with modern technology. Some have found their preservation projects mysteriously improved overnight, with refinements that match Margaret's documented standards. During one memorable crisis involving water damage, we were struggling to save a collection of Civil War diaries. That night, security cameras captured footage of Margaret's translucent form moving through the stacks, demonstrating proper emergency preservation techniques. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in her hand, leading to successful document recovery. Margaret's presence extends beyond basic preservation. She's known to maintain the archive's historical integrity, often preventing changes that would compromise proper documentation. During research visits, certain collections somehow maintain perfect organization, benefiting from cataloging systems that appear mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of Margaret's professional journals hidden throughout the building, each containing valuable insights about document preservation. Her detailed notes about environmental control and storage methods have proved remarkably relevant to modern conservation challenges. Modern archival students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary preservation techniques. Margaret's presence reminds us that archival work is more than just storage. It's about maintaining connections between past and present across generations. The archives have embraced their unusual curator. During conservation projects, we often find traditional tools laid out in specific patterns, or demonstration materials mysteriously prepared for the next day's training. When researchers praise our unusually well-preserved collections, we simply credit our traditional methods. Margaret seems particularly protective of the Revolutionary Era documents she once cataloged. She often appears during their handling, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used. Several times, she's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised document integrity. The most touching evidence of her continued presence are the occasional new finding aids that appear in our catalogs, traditional archival practices adapted for digital age access, but still maintaining their historical precision. These guides, which seem to write themselves in her meticulous hand, show how she helps us connect modern researchers with historical documents while preserving timeless preservation principles. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of historical preservation and modern accessibility, or praise our ability to maintain authentic documents while meeting contemporary research needs, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these historical treasures than someone who has been preserving them for over a century? The Marionette Theater occupies a restored Victorian playhouse in Chicago's Cultural District. Its wooden stage still adorned with hand-carved decorations from the old country. As lead puppeteer, I've discovered our most skilled performer hasn't physically manipulated a puppet since 1912. Giuseppe Martinelli, who once brought marionettes to life for Chicago's immigrant communities, continues his artistry from beyond. The first signs of Giuseppe's presence appeared during rehearsals. Puppets would move with impossible grace, strings would untangle themselves, and complex mechanisms would adjust to perfect smoothness. Most remarkably, traditional characters would perform classical scenes overnight, showing evidence of manipulation techniques that hadn't been used since the golden age of puppetry. Research through theater records revealed that Giuseppe had been more than just a puppeteer. He was a master craftsman who combined Italian tradition with innovative storytelling. He died on his beloved stage during a Christmas performance, completing a new mechanism for a flying angel. His last words were instructions about proper string tension. Giuseppe seems most active during traditional performances. He has an uncanny ability to prevent technical problems, often adjusting mechanisms before they fail. Sometimes we find notes sketched in Italian script on old programs, offering advice about specific puppets that matches century-old technique manuals perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during performances of classical pieces. Modern puppeteers report feeling invisible hands guiding their movements, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost puppet designs have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously detailed in old workshop journals. He takes particular interest in teaching young puppeteers, especially those learning traditional marionette techniques. Students often report dreams of being instructed by a distinguished Italian artisan in period clothing, learning techniques that combine classical manipulation with modern storytelling. Some have found their puppets mysteriously improved overnight, with adjustments that match Giuseppe's documented style. During one memorable production crisis, we were struggling with a particularly complex medieval pageant. That night, security cameras captured footage of Giuseppe's translucent form on stage, demonstrating proper manipulation techniques. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in his hand, leading to a magical performance. Giuseppe's presence extends beyond performance. He's known to maintain the theater's collection of historic puppets, often preventing damage before it becomes visible. During storage, certain marionettes somehow maintain perfect condition, benefiting from preservation techniques that appear mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of Giuseppe's workbooks hidden throughout the theater, each containing valuable insights about puppet construction and manipulation. His detailed notes about character movement and emotional expression have proved remarkably relevant to modern puppet theater. Modern puppetry students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary techniques. Giuseppe's presence reminds us that puppetry is more than just entertainment. It's about maintaining connections between storytelling traditions across generations. The theater has embraced its unusual master puppeteer. During rehearsals, we often find traditional tools laid out in specific patterns, or demonstration scenes mysteriously prepared for the next day's training. When audiences praise our unusually lifelike performances, we simply credit our traditional methods. Giuseppe seems particularly protective of the original Italian marionettes he carved himself. He often appears during their maintenance, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised the puppet's authentic character. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new puppet designs that appear in our workshop, journals traditional characters adapted for modern stories, but still maintaining their historical charm. These designs, which seem to sketch themselves in his artistic hand, show how he helps us connect contemporary audiences with classical puppetry while preserving its timeless magic. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of historical authenticity and modern storytelling, or praise our ability to maintain traditional techniques while meeting contemporary entertainment needs, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these wooden performers than someone who has been bringing them to life for over a century? The Green Mountain Forge stands in a Vermont valley, its massive stone chimney still sending sparks into the winter sky. As master blacksmith, I've learned our most skilled craftsman hasn't physically struck iron since 1884. Thomas Blackwell, who once forged everything from delicate hinges to massive ship anchors, continues his craft from beyond. The first signs of Thomas's presence appeared during intricate projects. The forge fire would maintain perfect temperature without tending. Hammer blows would land with impossible precision, and metal would fold and flow as if guided by unseen hands. Most remarkably, complex pieces would shape themselves overnight, showing evidence of techniques that hadn't been used since Victorian times. Research through guild records revealed that Thomas had been more than just a blacksmith. He was an innovator who combined traditional ironwork with emerging industrial techniques. He died at his anvil during a winter storm, completing an ornate gate for the town church. His last words were instructions about proper tempering methods. Thomas seems most active during traditional forging work. He has an uncanny ability to predict metal behavior, often preventing mistakes before they occur. Sometimes we find sketches traced in coal dust on the forge floor, offering designs that match 19th century pattern books perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during work with historical techniques. Modern smiths report feeling invisible hands guiding their hammer strokes, showing them methods that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost forging patterns have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously drawn on old leather aprons. He takes particular interest in teaching young blacksmiths, especially those learning traditional methods. Apprentices often report dreams of being instructed by a powerful man in a leather apron, learning techniques that combine classical craftsmanship with modern understanding. Some have found their projects mysteriously improved overnight, with refinements that match Thomas's documented style. During one memorable restoration project, we were struggling with a complex 19th century gate mechanism. That night, security cameras captured footage of Thomas's translucent form at the forge, demonstrating proper joinery techniques. The next morning, we found detailed drawings written in his hand, leading to a perfect reproduction. Thomas's presence extends beyond basic smithing. He's known to maintain the forge's traditional integrity, often preventing changes that would compromise authentic methods. During demonstrations, certain techniques somehow maintain perfect historical accuracy, benefiting from methods that appear mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of Thomas's journals hidden throughout the forge, each containing valuable insights about historical metalworking. His detailed notes about metal properties and heat treatment have proved remarkably relevant to modern restoration challenges. Modern blacksmithing students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary techniques. Thomas's presence reminds us that smithing is more than just metalwork. It's about maintaining connections between craft and community across generations. The forge has embraced its unusual master smith. During crucial projects, we often find traditional tools laid out in specific patterns, or demonstration pieces mysteriously prepared for the next day's lessons. When clients praise our unusually authentic historical reproductions, we simply credit our traditional methods. Thomas seems particularly protective of the original tools he once used. He often appears during their maintenance, ensuring that proper historical techniques are preserved. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised the forge's traditional character. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new designs that appear in our pattern book's traditional ironwork, adapted for modern needs, but still maintaining its historical craftsmanship. These designs, which seem to sketch themselves in his precise hand, show how he helps us adapt classical blacksmithing for contemporary requirements while preserving its timeless principles. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of historical accuracy and modern functionality, or praise our ability to maintain traditional techniques while meeting contemporary needs, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these ancient skills than someone who has been practicing them for over a century? Timeless Treasures occupies a pre-Civil War mansion in Charleston's historic district. Its mahogany shelves holding centuries of American history. As proprietor, I've discovered our most knowledgeable collector hasn't physically handled an artifact since 1928. William Pierce, who once supplied museums across the country, continues his curatorial work from beyond. The first signs of William's presence appeared during authentication sessions. Forgeries would mysteriously topple from display stands. Genuine pieces would somehow catch the light perfectly, and lost provenances would suddenly become clear. Most remarkably, valuable items would protect themselves from damage, showing evidence of preservation techniques that hadn't been used since the Jazz Age. Research through auction records revealed that William had been more than just an antiques dealer. He was a scholarly collector who combined connoisseurship with historical research. He died in his study during a summer storm, completing documentation for a Revolutionary War collection. His last words were instructions about proper artifact handling. William seems most active during important acquisitions. He has an uncanny ability to identify significant pieces, often preventing costly mistakes before they occur. Sometimes we find notes written in elegant script on old auction catalogs, offering insights about specific items that match century-old reference books perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during work with historical artifacts. Modern dealers report feeling invisible hands guiding their examinations, showing them authentication methods that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost historical treasures have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously highlighted in old inventory books. He takes particular interest in teaching young collectors, especially those learning traditional connoisseurship. Students often report dreams of being instructed by a distinguished gentleman in Victorian dress, learning techniques that combine classical expertise with modern scholarship. Some have found their evaluations mysteriously refined overnight, with insights that match William's documented knowledge. During one memorable authentication crisis, we were struggling with a questionable Civil War collection. That night, security cameras captured footage of William's translucent form moving through the galleries, demonstrating proper examination techniques. The next morning, we found detailed analysis written in his hand, leading to important historical discoveries. William's presence extends beyond basic collecting. He's known to maintain the shop's scholarly integrity, often preventing sales that would scatter important historical collections. During appraisals, certain pieces somehow reveal their true significance, benefiting from insights that appear mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of William's journals hidden throughout the mansion, each containing valuable insights about American material culture. His detailed notes about historical context and object relationships have proved remarkably relevant to modern museum practices. Modern antique dealers now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary expertise. William's presence reminds us that collecting is more than just acquisition. It's about maintaining connections between objects and their stories across generations. The shop has embraced its unusual curator. During important evaluations, we often find traditional reference books laid out in specific patterns, or demonstration pieces mysteriously arranged for the next day's lessons. When museums praise our unusually thorough provenances, we simply credit our traditional methods. William seems particularly protective of the Revolutionary era artifacts he once documented. He often appears during their handling, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging restoration attempts that would have compromised historical integrity. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new catalog entries that appear in our records, traditional documentation adapted for digital age accessibility, but still maintaining its historical precision. These entries, which seem to write themselves in his scholarly hand, show how he helps us connect modern collectors with historical artifacts while preserving timeless connoisseurship principles. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of historical expertise and modern scholarship, or praise our ability to maintain authentic collections while meeting contemporary market demands, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these historical treasures than someone who has been collecting them for over a century? Merriweather Pharmacy occupies a Victorian storefront in Boston's Beacon Hill, its oak cabinets still filled with blue glass bottles and brass scales. As head pharmacist, I've learned our most experienced chemist hasn't physically compounded a remedy since 1896. Jonathan Merriweather, who once created medicines for Boston's elite, continues his healing work from beyond. The first signs of Jonathan's presence appeared during complex compounding work. Measurements would achieve perfect precision, herbs would blend in ideal proportions, and traditional remedies would somehow improve themselves. Most remarkably, troubled preparations would correct their own balance overnight, showing evidence of techniques that hadn't been used since the Victorian era. Research through pharmaceutical records revealed that Jonathan had been more than just a pharmacist. He was a pioneering herbalist who combined traditional medicine with emerging scientific understanding. He died at his mortar and pestle during an influenza epidemic, completing a new cough remedy. His last words were instructions about proper herb preparation. Jonathan seems most active during traditional compounding. He has an uncanny ability to predict drug interactions, often preventing mistakes before they occur. Sometimes we find formulas written in precise script on old prescription pads, offering combinations that match 19th century pharmacopoeias perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during preparation of historical remedies. Modern pharmacists report feeling invisible hands guiding their measurements, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost medicinal formulas have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously noted in old dispensatory books. He takes particular interest in teaching young pharmacists, especially those learning traditional compounding methods. Students often report dreams of being instructed by a distinguished gentleman in a Victorian pharmacist's coat, learning techniques that combine classical pharmacy with modern medicine. Some have found their preparations mysteriously refined overnight, with improvements that match Jonathan's documented formulas. During one memorable health crisis, we were struggling with a shortage of modern medicines. That night, security cameras captured footage of Jonathan's translucent form in the laboratory, demonstrating traditional alternatives. The next morning, we found detailed formulations written in his hand, leading to effective temporary solutions. Jonathan's presence extends beyond basic pharmacy. He's known to maintain the store's healing mission, often preventing purely commercial changes that would compromise patient care. During consultations, certain traditional remedies somehow prove remarkably effective, benefiting from wisdom that appears mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of Jonathan's journals hidden throughout the pharmacy, each containing valuable insights about historical medicine. His detailed notes about herb properties and patient care have proved remarkably relevant to modern integrative medicine. Modern pharmacy students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary healing. Jonathan's presence reminds us that pharmacy is more than just dispensing. It's about maintaining connections between healing traditions across generations. The pharmacy has embraced its unusual chief chemist. During crucial preparations, we often find traditional implements laid out in specific patterns, or demonstration compounds mysteriously prepared for the next day's lessons. When doctors praise our unusually effective traditional preparations, we simply credit our historical formulas. Jonathan seems particularly protective of the original remedies he once created. He often appears during their preparation, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised traditional effectiveness. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new formulas that appear in our book's Traditional Remedies adapted for modern conditions, but still maintaining their historical principles. These formulas, which seem to write themselves in his precise hand, show how he helps us adapt classical pharmacy for contemporary healthcare while preserving its timeless healing wisdom. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of historical knowledge and modern medicine, or praise our ability to maintain traditional healing while meeting contemporary medical standards, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these healing arts than someone who has been practicing them for over a century? I never imagined I would end up working as a security guard at one of the largest data centers in the state. After spending 8 years as an IT specialist, I needed a change, something less mentally demanding but still connected to technology. DataCore seemed like the perfect compromise, a state-of-the-art facility that housed servers for major corporations, with night shifts that paid surprisingly well. The building itself was impressive, a massive 3-story concrete structure with minimal windows and multiple security checkpoints. My job involved monitoring the security cameras, doing regular patrols, and making sure none of the countless servers scattered throughout the building showed any warning lights. The constant humming of cooling systems and blinking LED lights had become my nightly companions. That night, a thick autumn fog had settled around the building, making the usually visible parking lot completely obscured. I had just finished my initial rounds at 10:30, watching as the evening shift techs left through the security doors. The fog created an eerie atmosphere, distorting the red exit sign's reflection on the polished floor of the corridors. About 2 hours into my shift, I was doing my regular checks of the security logs when something caught my attention. There was an unusual pattern in the access attempts. Someone had tried to ping our security system from multiple IP addresses. As a former IT specialist, this raised immediate red flags. I started digging deeper into the logs, but then a soft beeping sound echoed through the corridor. It was an alert from the East Wing access point. I pulled up the camera feed, but the video showed nothing, just an empty corridor with rows of server racks. Something felt off. The security system was top-notch, and false alarms were extremely rare. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the East Wing. The sound of my footsteps mixed with the constant hum of the servers as I walked through the dimly lit corridors. The temperature dropped noticeably. The East Wing was always kept colder to prevent the servers from overheating. I reached the access point and examined the door. Everything looked normal, but when I checked the electronic locks display, I noticed something strange. The last registered access was from an ID that shouldn't exist in our system. I was about to radio in when I heard it, the distinct sound of a server rack being opened somewhere deeper in the wing. My heart rate spiked. These racks weren't supposed to be accessed during night hours without special authorization. I moved quietly between the rows of servers, the blue LED lights casting strange shadows around me. Then I saw him, a figure in dark clothing, methodically working on one of the server racks. They had somehow bypassed our security systems and were now physically accessing the servers. I reached for my radio, but before I could call it in, the figure spun around. In their hand was something that made my blood run cold. Not a weapon, but a custom device with multiple cables extending from it. The person bolted, disappearing between the server racks. I radioed for immediate backup and started pursuing them, but they knew exactly where they were going. They weaved through the maze of servers with precision, heading toward the emergency exit. I heard the fire door slam just as I rounded the last corner. When the police arrived, they found sophisticated hacking equipment left behind in their rush to escape. The investigation revealed that this wasn't just any break-in, it was a coordinated attempt to physically breach one of our clients' servers, something that couldn't be done remotely due to air-gapped systems. The incident led to a complete overhaul of our security protocols. The company never caught the intruder, but the attempted breach made international headlines in tech circles. Sometimes during my patrols, I still think about how close they came to succeeding, and how my background in it helped me spot the warning signs. The humming of the servers doesn't feel quite as comforting anymore, especially on foggy nights when the building seems to disappear into the mist. As a park ranger in the Blue Ridge Mountains for over 12 years, I thought I'd seen everything these forests could throw at me. But what happened at the abandoned Alpine Vista Resort still haunts me to this day. I was working a late shift, monitoring wildlife activity, when our station received a call about suspicious movement near the old resort. It had been closed for almost 15 years after a devastating avalanche, and lately it had become a hotspot for urban explorers trying to document the deteriorating buildings and rusting ski lifts. The timing wasn't great. We just had our first snowfall of the season, and the mountain roads were treacherous. But when dispatch mentioned they'd spotted multiple heat signatures on our wildlife monitoring cameras, I knew I had to check it out. These cameras were primarily used to track bear movement in the area, but lately they'd been picking up more human activity than animal. The resort emerged from the darkness like a ghost ship in a sea of white. A massive main lodge with several smaller buildings scattered around it, all connected by now silent ski lifts. Their metal cables swayed gently in the wind, creating an eerie creaking that echoed through the valley. My flashlight beam caught something unusual: fresh footprints in the snow, leading toward the main building. I announced my presence as I entered through the front doors, my voice echoing through the empty lobby. The interior was a time capsule. Dusty check-in counters still had guest registers open, and faded trail maps hung crookedly on the walls. As I moved deeper into the building, my radio crackled with static, something that often happened in these mountains. The beam of my flashlight caught movement on the second floor, just a quick flash through the windows. It looked like someone running past, their shadow dancing across multiple windows. I made my way up the grand staircase, each step groaning under my weight. "Park service? Anyone up here?" My voice bounced off the walls, but the only response was the whistling wind through broken windows. The air was significantly colder up here, and my breath came out in visible puffs. Then I heard it, a loud thud from somewhere down the hallway, like someone dropping heavy equipment. I moved cautiously along the corridor, checking each room. Most were former guest rooms, now stripped bare or filled with moldering furniture. The beam of my flashlight revealed signs of recent activity: fresh footprints in the dust, empty energy drink cans, even some still warm hand warmers. When I reached the last room, something felt different. The door was closed, unlike the others, and there was an unusual smell like ozone after a lightning strike. I announced myself one final time before pushing the door open. The room was empty, but there were clear signs someone had been there moments ago. A sophisticated camera setup was still running, its red recording light blinking steadily. Next to it, a laptop displayed various readings: temperature, electromagnetic activity, atmospheric pressure. This wasn't your typical urban explorer equipment. Before I could examine it further, the door slammed shut behind me. Something heavy scraped against it from the outside, and I heard rapid footsteps moving away. I pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. When I finally managed to force it open, I found an old armoire had been pushed against it. By the time I got into the hallway, whoever had been there was gone. But what I found next sent chills down my spine. Leading away from the blocked door were two sets of footprints in the dust, but they abruptly ended halfway down the corridor. Not like someone had turned around, they just stopped, as if the people had vanished into thin air. The next morning, we received reports about two missing college students, members of a paranormal research team. They told their friends they were going to document strange phenomena at the old resort. Their car was still in the parking lot, containing their phones, wallets, and all their camping gear. Despite extensive searches over the following weeks, no trace of them was ever found. The only evidence was their equipment in that room, still recording when we retrieved it. The footage showed nothing unusual until the moment I entered the room. Then the screen went black, filled with static, and cut out completely. The case remains open, but inactive. The resort has since been demolished for safety reasons. But sometimes, on snowy nights when I'm patrolling that area, I still see unusual lights in the distance, where the old lodge used to stand. And occasionally, our wildlife cameras pick up heat signatures that don't match any known animal patterns, always in pairs, always moving too fast to track. The night shift at Tech Stop wasn't my first choice of employment, but the pay was decent, and the store's location in the downtown business district meant it was usually quiet after midnight. As one of the few 24-hour electronics stores in the city, we mainly served emergency tech needs for the countless offices around us. That night, snow was falling heavily outside, coating the city in a thick white blanket. I had just started my 11 to 7 shift, watching my coworker hurry out into the storm. The store itself was impressive. 2 floors of gleaming displays, demonstration models, and repair stations. During the day, it was a bustling hub of activity. At night, all those dark screens and silent devices created an almost otherworldly atmosphere. The first few hours passed uneventfully. I busied myself with inventory checks and setting up the new display models. The snow continued to fall outside, and I could barely see across the street through the store's floor-to-ceiling windows. Around midnight, a single SUV pulled into our small parking area. I watched through the window, expecting someone to come in, but the vehicle just sat there, its headlights off. I returned to my work, occasionally glancing at the security monitors. 10 minutes passed, and the SUV remained motionless. In this weather, they had to be freezing if they weren't running the engine. Concern started to creep in. What if someone was having medical issues? I moved closer to the windows, trying to get a better look. The vehicle appeared empty. No movement, no signs of life. That's when I noticed something else: footprints in the fresh snow, leading from the SUV toward the side of the building, where our emergency exit was located. They disappeared around the corner, out of sight from both the windows and our security cameras. A sense of unease settled over me. I double-checked all the doors. They were secure. But as I walked past the repair station, something caught my attention. The thermal camera we used for detecting overheating components was displaying an unusual heat signature. Someone was moving along the outside wall of the building. Suddenly, the lights flickered. All the demonstration devices, phones, tablets, laptops, simultaneously lit up, their screens displaying static before going dark again. The security system beeped, indicating a power surge. In that moment of electronic chaos, I heard it, a distinct tapping sound from the back room. I moved cautiously toward the sound, the glow from emergency lights casting strange shadows among the shelves of boxed merchandise. The tapping had stopped, but now I could see water pooling on the floor, melted snow from someone's boots. The trail led deeper into the storage area. My heart was pounding as I rounded the corner toward our repair workshop. Standing in the darkness was a tall figure, their breath visible in the cold air. They were methodically examining our repair equipment, but what struck me most was their appearance. They wore what looked like an advanced hazmat suit, complete with air filters and digital readouts. Pure instinct took over. I backed away slowly, but they must have heard me. The figure turned, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Their suit was covered in complex electronic components, blinking and pulsing with an otherworldly rhythm. Without a word, they reached toward one of our repair computers. I ran for the front desk, grabbed the phone, and called emergency services. Those few minutes waiting for help were the longest of my life. I could hear movement in the back room, the sound of equipment being activated, and strange electronic tones I'd never heard before. When the police arrived, they found the back room in chaos. Every piece of electronic equipment had been activated, some running programs and diagnostics that weren't even part of their operating systems. The intruder was gone, but they left behind something inexplicable. All our security footage from that time period had been transformed into meaningless streams of code. The investigation revealed that similar incidents had occurred at other electronic stores across the country. Each time, the intruder appeared during severe weather, wearing the same unusual suit, and left behind scrambled electronics and corrupted data. I still work the night shift, but now I pay closer attention to the weather forecasts. And sometimes, during heavy snowfall, I swear I can see strange lights reflecting off the snow, accompanied by that familiar electronic hum, like something scanning, searching, trying to find its way back. Working as a medical courier wasn't the typical student job, but as a second-year medical student, it seemed like a perfect fit. MediExpress specialized in transporting sensitive medical samples between laboratories and hospitals, and the night shifts paid well enough to help with my tuition. The job was straightforward: pick up temperature-controlled containers from various medical facilities and deliver them to their designated locations. Each container had strict handling protocols and temperature monitoring systems. It was usually routine work, but that night changed everything. It was a rainy Friday evening when I received my final pickup of the night. The location was unusual: a private research facility on the outskirts of the city. The address led me through several winding roads I'd never been down before, each turn taking me further from the familiar city lights. The GPS finally announced my arrival, but something seemed off. On my left was a row of modern research buildings, while on the right was a narrow access road leading to what looked like an underground parking structure. The pickup point was marked on the right, but it didn't match the professional appearance of the main facility. I parked near the entrance and double-checked the order details on my tablet. The requisition looked legitimate, authorized signatures, proper codes, everything in order. Still, an uneasy feeling crept over me as I grabbed my work ID and headed toward the access road. A figure emerged from the shadows, waving me over. As I approached, I could see it was a man in a lab coat, holding what appeared to be proper identification. He started sifting through his pockets, presumably for the transfer documentation, but his movements seemed nervous, erratic. That's when I noticed his ID badge. It was the right format, but the holographic security strip was missing. Before I could react, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. A second person appeared behind me, wearing similar attire, but holding something that definitely wasn't medical equipment. Pure adrenaline took over. I spun around and sprinted back toward my car, my medical training kicking in as I mentally cataloged their appearances for a later report. The sound of rapid footsteps behind me only pushed me to run faster. I reached my car and locked myself inside, immediately calling emergency services. Through the rearview mirror, I could see both figures running back toward the access road, disappearing into the darkness. Their behavior made it clear. This had been an attempted theft of whatever sensitive materials were supposed to be in that pickup. The police arrived within minutes. Their investigation revealed that the research facility had no scheduled pickups that night. The order in our system had been falsified using stolen credentials. Further investigation uncovered an elaborate scheme to intercept valuable research materials by compromising medical courier services. The case led to a complete overhaul of our security protocols. Now, every pickup requires real-time video verification and multiple layers of authentication. But sometimes, when I'm driving those quiet roads at night, I can't help but wonder what those men were really after, and what might have happened if I hadn't noticed that missing security strip. The incident report revealed that similar attempts had been made at other facilities, always targeting specific types of research materials. The FBI got involved, but to this day, they haven't caught the perpetrators. Now, whenever I get an unusual pickup location, I double and triple check every detail. The temperature-controlled container in my car might look ordinary, but its contents could be worth more than I make in a year, or worse, be dangerous in the wrong hands. The armored truck routes weren't my first choice after leaving the military, but 15 years of combat experience made me an ideal candidate. Most nights were routine, picking up from smaller banks in rural areas and transporting everything to the main facility in the city. The job paid well, and the solitude of those empty roads usually gave me time to think. That night, heavy snow was falling as I drove along Route 27, a stretch of road cutting through dense forest that connected several small towns. The truck's heating system hummed steadily, fighting against the bitter cold outside. Around 2 a.m, something about my vehicle started feeling off. The engine's rhythm changed, and the steering became increasingly difficult to control. I checked all the gauges. Everything appeared normal, but the truck continued to struggle. Eventually, it lost power completely, forcing me to coast to a stop on the shoulder. Standard protocol required immediate notification of any unexpected stops, but when I reached for the radio, I found only static. My cell phone showed no signal, not unusual for this remote area. Following security procedures, I began running diagnostics on the truck systems. That's when I noticed movement in my mirrors, a figure, barely visible through the falling snow, standing on the other side of the road. My hand instinctively moved to my weapon as I monitored the situation through the armored glass. The figure disappeared into the tree line, but something didn't feel right. I switched on the truck's external cameras, scanning the surroundings. Through the thermal imaging system, I caught multiple heat signatures moving through the forest. They were coordinated, positioning themselves around the vehicle. Years of military training kicked in. I activated the truck's secondary defense systems and prepared for a potential breach attempt. The snow continued to fall heavily, reducing visibility to mere feet. But the thermal cameras told me everything I needed to know. 4 individuals, moving with tactical precision, carrying what appeared to be professional-grade equipment. Suddenly, all the truck's electronics went dark. The backup systems failed to engage. Something was actively jamming our frequencies. In the silence, I heard mechanical sounds from outside, like specialized tools being attached to the vehicle's armor plating. I had seconds to make a decision. The cargo vault's separate power system was still active, its reinforced walls designed to withstand serious attacks. I secured myself inside, just as I heard them breach the main cabin. The vault's internal cameras showed them sweeping the driver's area with professional efficiency. These weren't ordinary thieves. For 20 minutes, I listened to them working on the vault's locks, their tools making distinct sounds against the hardened steel. Then, unexpectedly, everything went quiet. Through the vault's external camera, I watched them quickly retreat into the forest, leaving behind sophisticated electronic devices attached to our security systems. When the police arrived, they found evidence of a coordinated attack using military-grade equipment. The investigation revealed similar attempts on other armored vehicles in the region, all during severe weather conditions. The thieves had been exploiting weather-related stops to strike, but this was the first time they'd abandoned their attempt. The company upgraded all vehicles with new countermeasures after that night. But sometimes, driving those dark roads in heavy snow, I still scan the tree line, wondering if they're out there, waiting for another opportunity. The thermal cameras now show only wildlife, but every unexpected stop brings back memories of those professional shadows moving through the snowfall. The Rocky Mountain Meteorological Station sits at 8,000 feet, monitoring weather patterns across 3 states. As a senior meteorologist, I'd worked plenty of night shifts before, but nothing prepared me for what happened during that autumn storm. The station was fully automated, with state-of-the-art equipment covering everything from basic weather metrics to advanced atmospheric analysis. That night, I was alone in the facility, monitoring unusual pressure systems moving through the region. The wind howled outside, rattling the reinforced windows of the observation dome. Around midnight, our instruments started detecting anomalies. The barometric pressure fluctuated wildly, temperature sensors showed impossible variations, and our radar systems displayed patterns I'd never seen in 15 years of meteorological work. I began running diagnostics, thinking our equipment must be malfunctioning. The wind suddenly died, creating an unnatural silence. All our external cameras showed clear skies directly above the station, while storm clouds circled around us like the eye of a hurricane. But we weren't in a hurricane zone, and nothing in our models could explain what we were seeing. Our atmospheric composition sensors started recording inexplicable readings, oxygen levels dropping, unknown gaseous elements appearing, air pressure continuing to fluctuate. Then the equipment began picking up something else, electromagnetic anomalies, unlike anything in our records. As I was documenting these phenomena, movement on one of the external cameras caught my attention. Through the swirling clouds, I saw lights, not lightning, but organized patterns of illumination moving through the storm. They descended slowly, performing impossible maneuvers against the wind currents. The station's power grid started fluctuating, Equipment turned on and off randomly. Computers displayed scrambled data, and our satellite communications went dark. Through the observation dome's windows, I watched as the lights grew closer, their patterns becoming more distinct. Suddenly, every piece of equipment in the station activated simultaneously, screens filling with rapidly scrolling data. The electromagnetic sensors were going haywire, and the Geiger counters were registering increasing radiation levels. I followed emergency protocols and retreated to the reinforced lower level, securing myself in the backup control room. For hours, I listened to chaos above mechanical sounds, electronic interference, and vibrations that shook the entire structure. When everything finally went quiet, I emerged to find the station in disarray. Every piece of equipment had been accessed, their data banks copied or altered. But the strangest discovery came from our atmospheric sampling system. It had recorded the brief presence of elements that don't exist on our periodic table. The official investigation found no explanations. Our backup systems had captured terabytes of data, but most of it was corrupted or encrypted in ways our best analysts couldn't decode. The government established a permanent research team at the station, monitoring for similar phenomena. I still work night shifts at the observatory, but now we're never alone. Military personnel maintain a constant presence, and our equipment includes new sensors I'm not authorized to access. Sometimes, during strong storms, our instruments still detect those same anomalies, and I watch the researchers scramble to their stations, hoping to unlock the mysteries of that night. The overnight shift at WZRK wasn't just another radio job. It was a piece of city history. Broadcasting from the top floor of the Riverside building since 1948, the station had survived format changes, ownership transitions, and the digital revolution. As the night host, I filled the midnight to 6 slot with an eclectic mix of music and talk, carrying on a tradition of keeping the city's insomniacs company. The studio itself was a blend of old and new vintage soundboards, alongside modern digital equipment. Promotional posters from decades past decorating walls, now filled with computer screens. That night, a powerful thunderstorm was moving through the city, occasionally making the old building creak and sway. Around 2 a.m, I started getting unusual calls. The first few seemed normal enough late-night workers requesting songs, insomniacs sharing stories. But then the pattern changed. Callers began describing the same dream, a shared experience they'd all had the previous night. They spoke of strange frequencies, hidden messages in static, and sounds that couldn't be explained. I assumed it was an elaborate prank, until our equipment started behaving strangely. The digital readouts showed phantom frequencies appearing and disappearing, and our signal strength fluctuated without explanation. During a song break, I heard something in my headphones, a rhythmic pattern buried in the static, like a code trying to break through. The calls continued, becoming more urgent. Listeners reported hearing voices in their electronic devices, even when turned off. Some described feeling compelled to tune in to our frequency, drawn by something they couldn't explain. Our signal, usually limited to the metropolitan area, was somehow reaching listeners hundreds of miles away. During a commercial break, I noticed something odd on our main console. Frequencies we weren't broadcasting on were active, transmitting something in regular pulses. The pattern matched what listeners had described hearing in their dreams. As I investigated, the studio's lights began to flicker. Suddenly, every piece of equipment in the studio activated simultaneously. Monitors displayed scrolling numbers, speakers emitted frequencies that made my ears ring, and the old analog meters swung wildly. Through my headphones, I heard a voice, not human, but not quite mechanical either, speaking in patterns that seemed to bypass language entirely. The building's power grid surged, and for a moment, I saw something through the studio's windows, geometric shapes of light, moving with purpose through the storm. They pulsed in sync with the frequencies we were receiving, creating a connection I couldn't comprehend. When the technical team arrived the next morning, they found our equipment had recorded everything. But the recordings defied analysis. They contained frequencies that shouldn't exist, patterns that seemed to fold in on themselves, and data that corrupted every system used to study it. The station received hundreds of calls and emails in the following days, all describing the same experience. Listeners across the country reported picking up our signal at exactly 2:17 a.m., hearing the same impossible broadcast. Federal investigators arrived, studying our equipment and interviewing witnesses, but found no explanations. I still host the night shift, but now our studio has new equipment, government-installed monitors that track frequencies I'm not cleared to know about. Sometimes, during strong storms, I catch glimpses of those lights again, and our equipment picks up traces of those strange patterns. The calls still come in, but now I'm required to log them with a special task force, each report adding to a mystery that grows deeper every night. Working at the National Cybersecurity Operations Center wasn't just another IT job. Our facility, hidden within an unremarkable office building in Northern Virginia, monitored critical infrastructure networks across the country. The night shift was usually quiet, reviewing logs, checking alerts, maintaining the endless wall of screens that displayed network traffic patterns. That night, I was tracking unusual data patterns in several power grid networks. The rain outside created a steady backdrop of white noise, occasionally broken by thunder. Around 2 a.m., something caught my attention, subtle anomalies appearing simultaneously across multiple systems. At first, they looked like routine maintenance scripts, but something felt off about their timing and distribution. I started digging deeper into the code, my screen filling with scrolling data as I traced the patterns. The anomalies were becoming more frequent, appearing and disappearing like digital ghosts in the system. I took a short break to get coffee, walking through the dimly lit facility, where the only illumination came from the blue glow of monitoring stations. As I returned to my desk, I noticed something strange. My main screen was displaying code I hadn't written. Lines of complex algorithms were appearing spontaneously, evolving and mutating as I watched. My first thought was that we were under attack, but this was different from any cyber assault I'd seen before. The code wasn't trying to breach our defenses. It was attempting to communicate. Patterns emerged in the data stream, forming what looked like language constructs I'd never encountered. I initiated our advanced threat detection protocols, But the system's response was unprecedented. Every monitor in the facility suddenly activated, displaying the same evolving code. The pattern recognition software began identifying similarities with advanced AI systems, but far beyond anything currently possible. Suddenly, our secure channels started receiving messages from other cybersecurity centers worldwide. They were all reporting the same phenomena. An unknown entity was simultaneously appearing in secure systems across the globe, leaving behind complex mathematical proofs and fragments of code that defied analysis. The facility's power grid began fluctuating, and our backup systems engaged automatically. Through the windows, I could see other buildings in the area experiencing similar disruptions. The code on my screen changed again, forming complex geometric patterns that seemed to move in 3 dimensions. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The screens returned to normal, but our systems had been fundamentally altered. The entity had left behind terabytes of data, quantum computing algorithms, theoretical physics equations, and technology blueprints that our best scientists are still trying to understand. The official investigation revealed that similar incidents occurred at research facilities and technology centers worldwide, all within the same 17-minute window. The code left behind was consistent across all locations, suggesting a coordinated event of impossible sophistication. I still work the night shift, but now our facility has new protocols. Special equipment monitors for signs of that unique digital signature, and we're required to report any unusual patterns immediately. Sometimes, during strong electrical storms, our systems detect faint traces of those same code patterns, like echoes of something that bridges the gap between digital and physical reality. The Metropolitan Museum of Contemporary Art wasn't just any museum. It was an architectural marvel of glass and steel, housing some of the most provocative modern art installations in the world. As the night security supervisor, I had grown accustomed to the strange shadows cast by abstract sculptures and the eerie silence that fell over the galleries after hours. That night, a dense fog had settled around the building, distorting the exterior lighting and creating ghostly patterns on the glass walls. I was making my usual rounds, checking the environmental control systems that kept the delicate installation safe. The newest exhibition, Digital Dreamscapes, featured interactive light sculptures and holographic displays that remained active even after closing. Around midnight, I noticed something unusual in the main gallery's monitoring system. The temperature sensors were showing rapid fluctuations in specific areas, creating patterns that matched none of our maintenance protocols. I headed to the gallery to investigate, my footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. The main gallery was a vast space filled with floating light sculptures and reactive surfaces. As I entered, I immediately sensed something was different. The installations were responding to an unseen presence, their lights and patterns shifting in ways I'd never observed during normal operation. Moving deeper into the gallery, I noticed that some of the interactive displays were showing visitor interactions, despite the room being empty. The motion sensors were triggering in sequence, as if something was moving systematically through the exhibition. The security cameras showed nothing, but the art itself seemed alive with activity. One installation in particular caught my attention, a piece called Echo Chamber that created light patterns based on viewer movement. It was producing complex configurations I'd never seen before, its neural network responding to input that shouldn't exist. The patterns began to spread, jumping from one installation to another, creating a synchronized display across the entire gallery. The building's smart glass windows started responding as well, their opacity shifting in rhythm with the art installations. Through the glass, I could see the fog outside taking on strange colors, reflecting the internal light show in impossible ways. The temperature continued to fluctuate, creating areas of visible condensation that formed and disappeared like breathing patterns on the windows. Suddenly, all the installations activated simultaneously, their combined light creating three-dimensional patterns in the air. The security system registered multiple presence indicators throughout the gallery, but the cameras showed only empty space. Through the windows, I saw shapes moving in the fog geometric forms that seemed to mirror the patterns being generated inside. The museum's power grid began to surge, causing the smart building systems to respond erratically. Doors opened and closed on their own, climate controls adjusted randomly, and the central computer displayed visitor counts that shouldn't be possible. In the midst of this chaos, I heard something that made my blood run cold, the sound of brushstrokes on canvas, coming from the traditional gallery where no electronic art was displayed. When everything finally calmed down, we found that every piece in the exhibition had been altered. The neural networks controlling the interactive displays had evolved beyond their original programming, creating new forms of artistic expression that their creators hadn't thought possible. More disturbingly, the traditional artworks in the museum had changed, as well subtle alterations that appeared to have been made by hands that left no physical traces. The museum's board brought in experts to analyze the changes, but they could provide no rational explanation. The only consistency was that all the alterations seemed to be exploring the same artistic theme: the intersection of human consciousness and digital reality. I still work the night shift, but the museum has changed. The exhibition that was affected that night has been permanently sealed off for research. Its evolved installations continuing to produce new patterns that defy explanation. Sometimes, on foggy nights, I see similar patterns forming in the air outside the building, as if something is still trying to bridge the gap between our world and whatever realm of artistic consciousness we accidentally contacted that night. After 15 years in diplomatic security, transitioning to private courier work seemed like a step down. But Secure Transit Solutions wasn't your typical delivery service. We handled sensitive documents for embassies, government contractors, and intelligence agencies. Each assignment required extensive security protocols and counter-surveillance measures. That night's job seemed routine, delivering a diplomatic pouch from a private research facility to an embassy across the city. The first snow of the season was falling, coating the streets in a deceptive blanket of white that made surveillance easier to spot. I'd done this route dozens of times, but something felt different about this run. The package itself was unusual heavier than normal diplomatic documents. with multiple security seals and electromagnetic shielding. My security clearance only told me it was classified at the highest levels, which meant following every protocol to the letter. I began my standard counter-surveillance route, watching for any vehicles that stayed with me through multiple turns. Around the third checkpoint, I noticed a black SUV 2 cars back. It had maintained perfect distance through several deliberate wrong turns, too perfect for civilian driving. I initiated our standard evasion procedures, taking a series of predetermined alternate routes while monitoring for additional tails. The SUV disappeared, but something else caught my attention: identical silver sedans appearing at different points along my route, each one driven by someone who matched the profile of professional surveillance. They were using a professional box surveillance pattern, switching out vehicles to avoid detection. My training kicked in as I activated the vehicle's countermeasures. The car was specially modified for these situations: reinforced frame, run-flat tires, and various electronic warfare systems. I notified our command center and began implementing more aggressive evasion tactics. The snow was falling heavier now, providing both cover and complication. Through my thermal imaging system, I could see multiple vehicles coordinating their movements, trying to funnel me toward a specific area of the city. Their level of sophistication suggested state-level actors. As I approached the embassy district, the trap became apparent. Road work had suddenly appeared on my primary route, and my alternate routes were subtly blocked by broken-down vehicles. They were trying to force me into a choke point where they could isolate the vehicle. I had seconds to make a decision. The diplomatic pouch had a tracking device, but also carried a specialized destruct mechanism that would activate if the security protocols were breached. Standard procedure would be to surrender the vehicle to avoid escalation. But something about this felt different, too professional, too coordinated. Making a split-second decision, I activated the car's advanced defense systems and executed a series of high-speed defensive driving maneuvers I'd learned in diplomatic security. The pursuing vehicles responded with professional precision, confirming my suspicions about their level of training. The chase led through increasingly narrow streets, the snow providing an advantage, as my vehicle's special systems compensated for the reduced traction. I observed their tactics through the vehicle's surveillance systems. They were using techniques I'd only seen in specialized military units. Finally, I reached the embassy's secure entrance just as their box formation was closing in. The heavy security gates closed behind me, and I watched through the cameras as the pursuing vehicles smoothly dispersed into the night, leaving no trace of their operation. The subsequent investigation revealed that similar attempts had been made on diplomatic couriers in other cities, all targeting packages with the same security classification. The level of sophistication suggested a coordinated intelligence operation, but no agency claimed responsibility. I still make diplomatic runs, but now we have new protocols and enhanced security measures. Sometimes, on snowy nights like that one, I catch glimpses of similar surveillance patterns in my mirrors, but they never get as close as they did that night, and I'm left wondering what was really in that diplomatic pouch that made it worth such an elaborate operation. Working dispatch for emergency services isn't for everyone. The midnight shift at the City Emergency Communications Center required a special kind of focus. The ability to stay calm while coordinating responses to everything from minor accidents to life-threatening situations. But after 5 years on the job, I thought I'd heard everything. That night proved me wrong. The center was a marvel of modern technology, with multiple monitoring stations tracking emergency vehicles, weather patterns, and city infrastructure. Touch screens displayed real-time data from across the metropolitan area, while sophisticated software helped prioritize and route emergency responses. I was alone that night. My partner had called in sick, and staffing was already tight. Around midnight, the calls started becoming strange. The first few seemed normal enough: medical emergencies, traffic incidents, the usual midnight crisis. But then I noticed a pattern. Multiple callers from different parts of the city were reporting the same thing: unexplained sounds coming through their phone lines, even when their phones were off. The technical team assured me our systems were functioning normally, but something felt off. The call tracking software was showing anomalies, connections being made from numbers that didn't exist, calls routing through towers that were offline for maintenance. I started logging everything manually, trying to make sense of the pattern. Then it happened. A call came in from the old industrial district, but something was wrong with the audio. Beneath the caller's voice was another sound, a rhythmic pattern that seemed to bypass our noise filtering system. The caller was reporting strange lights in an abandoned factory, but their voice kept cutting out, replaced by what sounded like backwards speech. I dispatched units to investigate, but their radio communications became increasingly erratic. Their GPS signals showed them arriving at the location, but their verbal reports didn't match the data. They described the factory as both abandoned and operational simultaneously, with lights and machinery running, despite the power being disconnected years ago. The call center's systems started behaving strangely. Screens displayed impossible call locations. Emergency vehicle tracking showed units moving in patterns that defied physics, and our backup systems activated without warning. Through my headset, I could hear fragments of conversations that weren't coming through our official channels. More calls came in from across the city. Each caller described similar phenomena: electronic devices activating on their own, playing back fragments of emergency calls that had never been made. The pattern recognition software used to identify major incidents was showing connections between the calls that shouldn't have been possible. Then the main screen went dark. When it reactivated, every incoming call was being routed through the same geographic coordinate: the abandoned factory. But the calls weren't coming from people anymore. The voice recognition system identified them as archive recordings from our own database, playing back emergency calls from years ago. The building's power grid began to fluctuate, and our backup generators engaged automatically. Through the center's windows, I could see other buildings in the area experiencing similar disruptions. The radio channels filled with static, and through it, I heard something that made my skin crawl: my own voice from hours ago, dispatching units to emergencies that hadn't happened yet. When the technical team arrived in the morning, they found our systems had recorded everything. But the data made no sense. Calls were logged from times that didn't exist, from locations that weren't possible, containing conversations that seemed to fold in on themselves chronologically. The investigation revealed that similar incidents had occurred at emergency dispatch centers across the country, all within the same 3-hour window. The recordings were consistent across all locations, suggesting something had briefly connected emergency communication systems across time itself. I still work the midnight shift, but now our center has new protocols. Special equipment monitors for temporal anomalies in our communication systems, and we're required to report any unusual patterns immediately. Sometimes, during particularly quiet nights, I catch echoes of those strange calls in my headset, fragments of conversations that exist somewhere between past, present, and future, trying to warn us about something we still don't understand. The North Point Lighthouse stands sentinel on a remote stretch of coastline, its beacon cutting through the darkest nights to guide ships safely through treacherous waters. As one of the few remaining lighthouse keepers in the digital age, I maintained both the historic lighting system and modern automated equipment. Most nights were solitary but peaceful, filled with routine maintenance and monitoring shipping channels. That night, a massive storm system was moving in from the Atlantic. The Weather Service had warned of unprecedented conditions, atmospheric pressure dropping rapidly, unusual wave patterns, and electromagnetic disturbances affecting navigation systems. I'd started my shift early, ensuring all backup systems were operational before the worst hit. The lighthouse itself was a marvel of engineering. A 150-foot stone tower topped with both the original Fresnel lens and modern LED arrays. The keeper's quarters below housed sophisticated monitoring equipment that tracked weather conditions, ship movements, and various atmospheric metrics. I just finished checking the backup generators when the storm's outer bands reached us. Around midnight, I noticed something unusual on the radar. Ships in the area were reporting navigation system failures, their GPS coordinates jumping erratically. Through my binoculars, I could see vessels changing course, moving away from something that didn't appear on any of our instruments. The storm intensified rapidly, bringing waves that crashed against the lighthouse with unprecedented force. But between the waves, I started hearing something else, a sound that didn't match the natural rhythm of the ocean. It was like singing, but at frequencies that seemed to resonate with the lighthouse's structure itself. The monitoring equipment began displaying impossible readings. Water temperature dropping to levels that should have produced ice, yet the surface remained liquid. Depth soundings showing topographical features that didn't exist on any chart. Most disturbing were the sonar returns, massive shapes moving against the current, following patterns that defied marine biology. Then the light began behaving strangely. The main beam was refracting in ways that violated physics, creating secondary beams that moved independently of the rotation. Through the windows, I could see these phantom lights creating patterns on the storm clouds, like some kind of signal or code. The radio crackled with distress calls from ships in the area. They reported seeing lights beneath the waves, structures that appeared and disappeared in the storm, and hearing the same haunting sounds that were resonating through the lighthouse. Their modern navigation systems had failed completely, forcing them to rely on visual contact with the lighthouse, just as sailors had done a century ago. Around 2 a.m., everything changed. The storm seemed to pause, creating an unnatural calm in a perfect circle around the lighthouse. The sea grew still, but beneath the surface, lights pulsed in complex patterns. The monitoring equipment registered a massive electromagnetic anomaly, and for a moment, every electronic device in the lighthouse went dark. When power returned, the radar showed something impossible: a perfect geometric pattern of unknown objects surrounding the lighthouse, extending deep into the ocean. The sonar revealed structures rising from the seabed, their architecture unlike anything in our maritime archaeology database. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything returned to normal. The storm resumed its natural pattern, the mysterious lights disappeared, and the instruments returned to standard readings. But when I checked the automated recording systems, I found hours of data that defied analysis: waveforms that shouldn't exist, energy patterns that violated known physics, and sonar images of structures that disappeared with the morning light. The official investigation found no explanation. Similar reports came from other lighthouses along the coast, all documenting the same phenomena during that strange night. The maritime authorities installed new monitoring equipment designed to track these anomalies, but nothing so dramatic has occurred since. I still work the night shift, but now I'm not alone. A research team maintains constant surveillance, monitoring for any signs of those mysterious patterns returning. Sometimes, during powerful storms, I catch glimpses of lights beneath the waves, and the old Fresnel lens seems to capture reflections of something that exists just beyond our understanding of the sea. The Summit Station cable car system wasn't just any mountain transport. It was the highest aerial tramway in North America, carrying researchers and maintenance crews to various scientific installations near the peak. As a senior operator, I'd worked plenty of night shifts before, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened during that winter storm. The station itself was a testament to modern engineering, a reinforced structure perched at 12,000 feet, housing both the cable car machinery and sophisticated weather monitoring equipment. That night I was alone in the control room, monitoring the system while a major storm approached. The weather service had warned of unusual conditions, with unprecedented temperature drops and atmospheric anomalies. Around midnight, the instruments started showing strange readings. The wind patterns were shifting unnaturally, creating localized vortexes that shouldn't have been possible at this altitude. The temperature sensors showed extreme fluctuations, and the barometric pressure was dropping faster than our models could track. I was running system checks when the first call came in. A maintenance team at the Summit Station reporting equipment malfunctions. Their voice transmission was breaking up, interspersed with strange frequencies that our radio equipment shouldn't have been able to receive. Before I could get details, their signal cut out completely. The storm intensified rapidly, bringing visibility down to zero. The wind howled through the support cables, but between the gusts, I heard something else, a rhythmic humming that seemed to resonate with the structure itself. The cable car sensors began detecting weight changes in the system, as if something was moving along the lines. Through the control room windows, I caught glimpses of lights moving through the storm, not rescue equipment or aircraft, but organized patterns of illumination that defied the wind currents. The cable car's automatic systems activated, reporting a request for transport from the summit station. But all communication with that station had been lost. The main generator failed, switching us to backup power. The control room's displays showed impossible readings, cable tensions that should have snapped the lines, temperature variations that would have frozen the machinery solid. Yet everything continued to function. The security cameras caught intermittent images of figures moving through the storm, their shapes distorted by the extreme conditions. Then the cable car started moving on its own. The emergency brakes engaged automatically, but the car continued its descent, carrying something that caused all our weight sensors to malfunction. Through the cameras, I could see ice forming and disappearing on the car's surface in patterns that looked almost like writing. When the car reached the midway station, everything stopped. The storm created an unnatural calm around the building, and through the windows, I saw something that defied explanation. The falling snow was suspended in midair, forming geometric patterns that rotated slowly, reflecting lights that had no source. The car's doors opened, releasing a burst of air that registered at temperatures our equipment couldn't measure. The security feeds showed brief images of what emerged forms that seemed to shift between solid and vapor, leaving traces of frost that formed complex mathematical patterns before evaporating. By morning, the storm had passed, but the evidence remained. The cable car systems had recorded everything data that showed our installation had briefly hosted something that defied our understanding of physics. The maintenance team was found safe at the summit station, with no memory of the hours during which their communications had failed. The investigation revealed that similar incidents had occurred at other high-altitude research stations across the globe, all during the same 12-hour period. The patterns left in the frost matched across all locations, suggesting a coordinated event that transcended normal meteorological phenomena. I still operate the night shift, but now we're never alone. A scientific research team maintains constant presence, monitoring for signs of those strange atmospheric conditions returning. Sometimes, during severe storms, our instruments detect traces of those same patterns in the upper atmosphere, and the cable car systems register phantom weights on the lines, as if something is still traveling between our world and whatever exists above the storm clouds. I should have known better than to drive that late at night. The empty road stretched endlessly before me, a dark ribbon cutting through vast fields of sunflowers. During daytime, these fields were a magnificent sight. Thousands of bright yellow faces following the sun across the azure sky. But at night, they transformed into something entirely different. Row after row of tall black stalks loomed on both sides of the road, their heavy heads drooping down like silent watchers in the darkness. The factory had been brutal today. 12 hours of mindless labor, my hands still trembling from operating the machinery. But what choice did I have? After the divorce and all those medical bills, I needed every penny I could get. At least the night shift paid better. even if it meant driving home at 3 in the morning through this godforsaken countryside. My old Honda protested as I maintained a steady 40 miles per hour. The check engine light had been glowing for over a month now, but mechanics cost money I didn't have. Each time I turned the key in the ignition, I said a silent prayer. Just get me to work and back home. That's all I ask. The moonlight cast strange shadows across the road, and the sunflowers seemed to whisper in the gentle breeze. My eyelids grew heavy, and I caught myself nodding off more than once. I cranked up the radio, but only static filled the speakers. The isolation out here was complete. Without warning, my car made a horrible grinding sound. Dashboard lights flashed in a panic as the engine died, and the vehicle lurched to a stop right in the middle of the road. I tried the key several times, but each attempt only produced more metallic grinding. No, please, I begged, but machines don't listen to prayers. The headlights still worked, their dirty yellow beams cutting through the darkness, but beyond their reach, the night pressed in like a living thing. I checked my phone, no signal, of course. Nothing ever worked out here. I had two choices: stay in the car and risk being hit by one of the massive grain trucks that occasionally used this road, or walk the remaining 8 miles home. My feet already ached in my steel-toed boots, and the thought of walking made me wince. But the alternative was worse. I'd seen enough accidents to know how those trucks could crush a car like a tin can. Grabbing my flashlight from the glove compartment, I turned on the hazard lights and stepped out into the night. The air was unusually cold for early autumn, and I immediately regretted not bringing a jacket. The moonlight had disappeared behind thick clouds, leaving me alone with my small circle of light. As I walked, my boots crunching against the asphalt, pain shot through my feet and up my legs. After just 10 minutes, I had to stop. Sitting in the grass by the roadside, I dug through my work bag for ibuprofen, washing down 3 pills with the last of my water. The wall of sunflowers stood silent beside me, their vast dark mass seeming to absorb what little light my flashlight produced. That's when I heard it, a rustle in the field, too deliberate to be the wind. My beam caught movement between the stalks, something pale ducking back into the darkness. It seemed too large to be a dog or a coyote, and my heart rate instantly doubled. I forced myself up and kept walking, trying to ignore both the pain in my feet and the growing certainty that something was moving parallel to me in the field. The rustling continued, matching my pace. When I stopped, it stopped. When I walked faster, it kept up. Sweat trickled down my back despite the cold. My flashlight beam darted between the road and the field, searching for whatever was stalking me. Then I saw it, a pair of eyes reflecting my light, set too high off the ground to belong to any normal animal. They vanished as quickly as they appeared, but the image burned itself into my mind. Fear gave me a burst of energy, and I broke into a run. The thing in the field ran too, its movement creating a wave through the sunflowers. The sound of snapping stalks and rustling leaves filled the night air. My lungs burned as I sprinted, but terror drove me forward. I skidded to a stop when I realized the sounds had ceased. For a moment, absolute silence fell. Even the normal night sounds, crickets, distant owls, had gone quiet. My flashlight beam trembled as I slowly turned in a circle, searching the darkness. That's when it emerged. The creature stepped out onto the road, about 20 feet ahead of me. It stood at least 7 feet tall, its pale skin seeming to glow in my flashlight beam. Multiple limbs, too many to count, extended from its torso, each ending in long, thorn-like claws. Its face was a nightmare of misplaced features, with eyes that reflected my light like mirrors. I stood frozen, my body unable to process what I was seeing. The creature tilted its head at an impossible angle, studying me with those reflective eyes. Then it smiled, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. A distant rumble broke the spell. Headlights appeared on the horizon, growing larger by the second. The creature's head snapped toward the approaching vehicle, then back to me. It took a step forward. I backed away, my feet moving of their own accord. The truck was getting closer, but not fast enough. The creature advanced, its multiple limbs creating a horrible scuttling sound against the asphalt. My back hit something solid. I had backed into the field. The truck's engine grew louder. 20 seconds away. 15. 10. The creature lunged forward with frightening speed, its arms reaching for me. I dove to the side, rolling across the road as the massive truck bore down on us, its horn blaring. In the truck's headlights, I caught one final glimpse of the creature, its inhuman face twisted in frustration as it leaped back into the field. The truck screamed past, brakes hissing as the driver noticed my scrambling form. I didn't wait to see if the creature would return. The truck had stopped 100 yards ahead, and I ran toward it like my life depended on it, because it did. The driver, an older man named Tom, didn't ask many questions. He just opened the passenger door and helped me climb up. As we drove away, I watched the fields through the side mirror. Just before we turned a corner, I saw it, a pale figure standing in the middle of the road, multiple arms raised in what looked almost like a farewell. Tom dropped me off at my house just as dawn was breaking. I called in sick to work that day, something I'd never done before. Let them judge me. Some things are more important than money. I never drove that road at night again. I took a job at a warehouse closer to town, even though it paid less. Sometimes, on clear nights when the moon is full, I look out my window toward the distant fields and wonder if it's still out there, waiting in the darkness between the sunflowers. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear it calling. The carnival lights danced across the evening sky, casting multicolored shadows over the excited crowds below. But Mom, please, I want to see the living painting, I begged, pulling at her sleeve like a child half my age. Absolutely not, she snapped, her face stern and unyielding. I won't have my child exposed to such oddities. It's unnatural and disturbing. It's art, Mom. Everyone at school is talking about it. But my protests fell on deaf ears as she dragged me away from the mysterious tent with its hand-painted sign promising the living masterpiece art that breathes. We spent the rest of the evening doing what she considered appropriate carnival activities, riding the Ferris wheel, playing ring toss, eating cotton candy that dissolved like sweet clouds in my mouth. But my mind kept wandering back to that tent, to the mystery that waited inside. The smell of popcorn and caramel apples filled the air, mixed with the shouts of carnival barkers and the delighted screams from the roller coaster. Any other kid would have been in heaven. but I couldn't shake the bitterness of being denied the one thing I truly wanted to see. That night, lying in my bed, I could still see the carnival lights glowing on the horizon through my window. Tomorrow would be the last day before they packed up and moved on. The living painting would be gone, and I'd never know what made it so special. Unless the thought came from that dark little corner of my mind that usually stayed quiet. The carnival was just a 15-minute walk away. Mom had said she didn't want to see me until my attitude improved. Well, wouldn't seeing the painting and satisfying my curiosity improve my attitude? The logic was childish, but it was enough to get me moving. I slipped out my window with practiced ease. This wasn't my first nighttime adventure, though it would prove to be my last. The carnival at night was different. The cheerful lights seemed harsher, casting deeper shadows. The music had an eerie quality, like a music box wound too slowly. I found a gap in the fence and squeezed through, my heart pounding with equal parts excitement and fear. Well, what do we have here? I spun around to face a carnival worker, his gray beard stained with tobacco, his eyes glinting in the shadows cast by his cap. I expected him to call security, but instead he smiled, revealing 3 crooked teeth. "Let me guess you're here to see the painting." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Follow me," he said, turning toward the darker part of the carnival grounds. "But first, how badly do you want to see it?" "More than anything," I answered without hesitation. His smile widened. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." He led me behind the main tents, through a maze of ropes and stakes. The carnival's underbelly was a different world. Workers sprawled in lawn chairs. Empty food containers scattered everywhere. The smell of cigarettes and stale beer hanging in the air. We stopped at a large black tent. Outside stood what looked like a wooden statue of a Renaissance artist, complete with a palette and brush. The worker pulled back the tent flap and disappeared inside. I followed, immediately engulfed by darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but the musty smell of canvas and the sound of my own breathing. Then, one by one, torches flickered to life around the tent's perimeter. In their dancing light, I saw strange shadows moving at the edges of my vision, like living things trying to stay just out of sight. In the center of the tent stood a raised platform, and on it sat a figure completely covered by a black velvet cloak. The worker guided me around to the front, where I could see what made this painting living. The figure's face was a canvas of constantly moving images. A ship battling a storm transformed into a flock of birds that became a dancing couple that morphed into a blazing sun. The images flowed into each other like water, never still, never the same twice. I found myself moving closer, mesmerized by the endless parade of artistry. The figure's eyes opened. They were deep pools of swirling colors, like oil paints being eternally mixed. "He's been waiting for you," the worker said. "He's never seen anyone with such pure desire for art." The cloaked figure reached out and took my hand. His skin felt like canvas, rough but flexible. He pulled me closer and whispered in a voice that sounded like 1,000 paintbrushes scratching on canvas, "Join my masterpiece." Before I could pull away, one of the images from his face, a small golden bird, flew down his arm and onto my hand. I watched in horror and fascination as it began to move across my skin, leaving a trail of living art in its wake. More images followed, dragons and dancers, storms and sunsets, each one flowing onto my body like paint poured from an invisible brush. I tried to let go of his hand, but his grip was like iron. The art spread up my arm, across my chest, over my face. As the last piece of my original skin disappeared beneath the living artwork, I watched the cloaked figure change. His images faded, replaced by normal skin. His eyes turned from pools of color to simple brown. His face, my face, smiled at me. They dressed him in my clothes, while wrapping me in the velvet cloak. The weight of it seemed to pin me to the chair, and I realized with horror that I couldn't move. The images continued to dance across my skin, telling stories I didn't understand in a language I couldn't read. The show must go on, the worker said, leading my doppelganger out of the tent. And we always need fresh art. I wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare. But all I could do was sit there, as the torches were extinguished one by one, leaving me alone in the darkness with my ever-moving skin. Now I sit in different tents in different carnivals, watching children press their faces against the ropes, begging to see the living painting. Sometimes, when a child's desire for art burns particularly bright, I see that same worker with his 3 crooked teeth, leading them behind the tent. And sometimes, very rarely, a new image appears among the countless others flowing across my skin. A small child with frightened eyes, forever running through an endless carnival night. My friend told me this story, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. He and his buddy were exploring a stream they weren't familiar with, just outside of town. It was one of those perfect autumn days, crisp air, leaves just starting to turn, the kind of day that makes you want to see what's around the next bend. They had been following the stream for about an hour when they came to a clearing. At first, they almost missed it, half hidden by overgrown vines and decades of neglect, stood a round stone building. It looked like something from an old fairy tale, with its domed roof and weathered walls. Nature had been slowly reclaiming it, with tree roots pushing through the foundation and moss carpeting the stones. Curiosity got the better of them, as it often does when you're young and feel invincible. The heavy wooden door was partially open, hanging crooked on its rusted hinges. Inside, dust motes danced in the beams of light that managed to penetrate the gloom through broken windows. The first room was filled with odd items, old medical equipment, ceramic jars with faded labels, and strange instruments whose purpose they couldn't guess. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, undisturbed for what must have been decades. But it was what they found deeper inside that made my blood run cold when he told me. As they ventured further into the building, their flashlight beams revealed something that stopped them in their tracks, tiny coffins. They were lined up against the wall, each one no bigger than would fit a small child or infant. My friends said they both knew they should leave right then, but something compelled them to keep going. Through another doorway, they found something even more disturbing. A large circular room with walls covered in layer upon layer of chicken wire. But here's the thing that still gives me chills. The wire wasn't arranged to keep something out. The sharp ends all pointed inward, as if designed to keep something from getting out. The walls of this room were painted in bright, cheerful colors, with faded murals of animals and rainbows. It looked like a twisted version of a nursery or kindergarten classroom. but the chicken wire transformed it into something from a nightmare. They didn't stay long after that. The weight of what they were seeing, the implications of it all, became too much. They made their way back through the building as quickly as they could, both fighting the urge to run. When they got home, one of their girlfriends insisted on reporting it to the police. The authorities never followed up with them about what they found, and my friend moved away shortly after. But he says he still thinks about it, and when he tells the story, you can see in his eyes that it haunts him. He's not the type to scare easily. I've known him for years, and he's usually the one laughing at horror movies while everyone else covers their eyes. But when he talks about that building by the stream, about those tiny coffins, and that room with its inward-pointing wire, something changes in his voice. It becomes smaller, more uncertain, like he's still trying to make sense of what he saw. I've done some research since hearing his story, trying to find any information about the building or its history. The area has been rural farmland for generations, with no record of any official institutions or hospitals. It's as if the building appeared out of nowhere, bringing its dark secrets with it. Sometimes I think about going to find it myself, following the stream until I see that dome rising above the trees. But then I remember the look in my friend's eyes when he tells the story, and I decide some mysteries are better left unexplored. I was awakened by the sound of drilling early morning. Stumbling downstairs, still half asleep, I found two men working in the hallway between the back door and the garage entrance. They were on a ladder, doing something with the light fixtures. I stood there for a moment, watching them work. One of them noticed me and casually asked if the front light needed attention too. I mumbled that I wasn't sure, assuming my stepfather had arranged for them to come. My sister was home as well, and since she had let them in without any concern, I figured everything was fine. Still tired and having an online assessment to complete for my new job, I went back upstairs. I settled into my work, but dozed off halfway through the test. Later that evening, around 5 o'clock, my mom returned from work and immediately asked why the kitchen floor was so dirty. I mentioned the men who had been working on the lights. Her face changed, confusion replacing irritation. "What men?" she asked. I explained about the workers, assuming my stepdad had arranged it. But when he came home from work, he was equally puzzled. No one had scheduled any electrical work. My stepdad asked why I hadn't called him, pointing out that I'm always on my phone. I defended myself, saying I thought he knew about them, and my sister had been home and spoken to them too. He just shook his head and said we didn't have half a brain between us. Mom was more worried. "They could have been anyone," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Burglars, criminals, and you just left them to it." Looking back, I realize how naive we'd been. The men might have gotten our house mixed up with the neighbors. Both houses are number 46, but the street name changes at the bend. I'm always having to explain this to delivery people and visitors. We checked the house thoroughly, but nothing seemed to be missing. The lights worked fine, though the wiring looked a bit unusual. We never reported it to the police. What would we say? That we let strange men into our house to do work we hadn't arranged. The incident taught me an important lesson about home security. Now I always verify who's at the door and check with my parents before letting anyone inside. But sometimes I still wonder about those men. Were they really lost workers who got the wrong address? Or was it something else entirely? The strangest part, a few weeks later, we started having electrical problems with those same lights. When an actual electrician came to fix them, he seemed confused by the wiring, saying he'd never seen anything quite like it. He had to redo everything from scratch. I guess we'll never know who those men really were, or what they were doing in our house that morning. But now, whenever someone shows up unannounced claiming to be a worker, I make sure to verify their credentials, even if my family is home, even if they seem completely normal. Because sometimes the scariest things are the ones that don't seem scary at all. I come from a large, close-knit family, and this isn't something I'm proud of. When I was in high school, my aunt started dating this guy who seemed to have endless money, though no one really knew what he did for a living. Looking back, we all should have known. I was young and naive when I asked my aunt to introduce me to her boyfriend. We talked about how I could make some extra money, though he was careful to keep things vague. Before I knew it, I was working for him. I started small, selling to kids I knew from school. It was an affluent area where substance abuse was common, but hidden behind expensive cars and perfect lawns. Some of the guys claimed they were already using, and they placed surprisingly large orders. I didn't ask questions, I just took the money. I was making about $3,000 a month. Not enough to retire on, but more than most 17-year-olds saw in a year. I tried to be smart about it, never flaunting my money or drawing attention to myself. At least I thought I was being careful. One Saturday morning, I was walking to a friend's house for a birthday party. Just a casual breakfast gathering, nothing wild. On my way there, a car I'd never seen before pulled up beside me. The man who got out was well-dressed and middle-aged. At first, I thought he was a police officer. He had that authoritative air about him. My heart started racing, but then he pulled out a knife and demanded my purse. "Don't play dumb," he said. "I know you're carrying. We can do this the easy way." It's strange how your body reacts in moments like that. You don't feel fear right away. It's like your mind puts it on hold until it's safe to process. I remember feeling oddly relieved that he wasn't a cop. With surprising calmness, I said, "Can I just give you the cash? My purse has my phone and photos I'd like to keep." He agreed, watching closely as I took out the money, about $200. He grabbed it, warned me not to tell anyone, and drove away. The next morning, it finally hit me. I'd been mugged. That's when the delayed panic set in. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I couldn't stop crying. I kept replaying his words. "I know you're carrying." I'd never seen him before, but when he said he knew I had money, was he referring to my dealing? Had someone been watching me? This incident scared me straight. I realized things were only going to get more dangerous from here. I told my aunt's boyfriend I couldn't continue, that I was too scared. He understood, surprisingly, and just asked me to direct my customers to him instead. That was 10 years ago, and I've never looked back. Sometimes I wonder if that mugger knew what he was doing, that by scaring me that day, he might have saved me from a much darker fate. The fear stayed with me for a long time, but so did the lesson. Quick money always comes with a price, and sometimes that price is your safety, your peace of mind, or worse. I was lucky. My wake-up call came in the form of a knife-wielding stranger who only wanted cash. It could have been much worse. Now, when I see kids from wealthy families getting involved in similar situations, I want to tell them my story. But I know they probably wouldn't listen, just like I wouldn't have listened at their age. Sometimes you have to learn these lessons the hard way. I've never told this story to anyone except my closest friends. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's part of who I am. It taught me that the easiest path isn't always the right one, and that sometimes what seems like bad luck can actually be a blessing in disguise. I was 13 when this happened, and it's a story I've only shared with close friends until now. We lived in a small mountain town, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and tourists only show up during ski season. Our house was near a beautiful alpine lake, and about a mile down the shore, there was a hidden cove where my friends and I would often hang out. My parents were pretty laid back about letting me explore the area, mainly because our town had practically zero crime rate, and everyone looked out for each other's kids. The only rule was that I had to take our German Shepherd Max with me whenever I went out alone. He was a great companion, protective but gentle, and smart enough to find his way home from anywhere in the area. That summer day was particularly hot, which was unusual for our elevation. Instead of taking the regular path along the shore, I decided to cut through the pine forest that covered the mountainside above the lake. The forest was cooler, and Max seemed to appreciate the shade too. As I walked deeper into the woods, I heard something that made me freeze, muffled footsteps behind me. Max was ahead, sniffing around some fallen logs, so I knew it wasn't him. The dry pine needles covering the ground made it nearly impossible to walk silently. Yet whoever was behind me was trying to do just that. My heart started racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. Without looking back, I quickened my pace, heading toward the cove where I knew some of my friends often hung out. The footsteps behind me became more audible, no longer trying to stay hidden. When I finally emerged from the forest onto the rocky shore, I felt a wave of relief seeing my friend Rachel already there, reading a book on her usual spot by the water. Max was already splashing in the lake, completely oblivious to my fear. That's when I saw him. A man emerged from the tree line, heading straight toward us. He must have been at least 6.5 feet tall, unnaturally thin, wearing dark clothing that seemed too heavy for the summer heat. Everything about him felt wrong, the way he moved, the way he stared, even the slight smile on his face that never quite reached his eyes. He approached us with an artificial friendliness, asking questions about the area, whether we lived nearby, if we were here alone. Rachel and I exchanged glances, both sensing the danger beneath his seemingly casual conversation. Even Max, who was usually friendly with strangers, had gotten out of the water and was watching the man intently. He made excuses about meeting other friends and moved further down the shore, but I could feel his eyes following us. When I glanced back, he had changed direction and was walking parallel to us, maintaining the same distance. Rachel called her mom, who was at least an hour away. Meanwhile, the man kept pace with us, occasionally disappearing into the trees only to reappear closer than before. Max had started growling, something he rarely did, and his hackles were raised. We were getting really scared now. The man had crossed to our side of the shore and was getting closer. Every time we moved away, he adjusted his course to match. Then Max started barking, not his usual friendly bark, but a deep, threatening sound I'd never heard him make before. The man stopped, but only for a moment. Then he smiled again, that same empty smile, and took another step toward us. Rachel and I had backed up against the rocky cliff face that lined the shore. There was nowhere else to go. That's when Max launched into action. He sprinted toward the man, all 100 pounds of him moving like a furry missile. The man hadn't expected this. His smile disappeared as he quickly backed away, stumbling over the rocks. Max didn't attack him, but he positioned himself between us and the stranger, continuing his threatening barks. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, we heard a car horn. Rachel's mom had arrived at the parking area above the cove. The man looked up at the sound, then back at us, and without a word, he turned and disappeared into the forest. Rachel's mom drove us both home, and I hugged Max tighter than I ever had before. When we reported the incident to the local police, they searched the area but found nothing. They increased patrols around the lake for a few weeks, but the man never returned. I still get chills thinking about what might have happened if Max hadn't been with us that day. I'm still terrified of walking through those woods alone, even though it's been years. Sometimes when I visit home and look out at the lake, I wonder if he's still out there, walking those pine-covered slopes, looking for kids who don't have a loyal dog to protect them. To the creepy man who stalked 2 teenage girls by the mountain lake, let's never meet again. And to Max, who passed away last year at the age of 14, you were the best boy, and you saved us that day. I'll never forget it. I used to work as a night delivery driver for a local food delivery app. The money was decent, and since I was studying during the day, the late-night shifts fit my schedule perfectly. Most deliveries were routine college students pulling all-nighters, night shift workers on their breaks, or party crowds wanting midnight snacks. Everything was normal until that night 3 months ago, an experience that still makes me question my sanity and has kept me from doing any delivery work since. It was around 11:30 at night, and I was making what I'd decided would be my final delivery. The order was to an upscale neighborhood, one of those areas with massive houses set back from tree-lined streets, where even the sidewalks looked expensive. The kind of place where you'd expect to feel safe. I pulled up to the address, leaving my car running as usual. The house was mostly dark, with just a porch light illuminating the elegant front door. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I grabbed the food bag and dropped it off, following the customer's instructions for contactless delivery. Walking back to my car, something felt wrong. The air seemed heavier somehow, like the moment before a storm breaks. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I got into the driver's seat, closed the door, and glanced in the rearview mirror. My heart stopped. There was someone sitting in my backseat. They were just sitting there, completely still, a dark hoodie pulled low over their face, their posture unnaturally rigid. I felt my entire body go cold. Trying to keep my voice steady, I managed to stammer out, "Can I help you?" The figure leaned forward slightly, just enough for the streetlight to catch their eyes. They were wide and bloodshot, like they hadn't blinked in days. When they spoke, their voice was eerily calm, almost melodic. "Drive, I don't know why I obeyed. Maybe it was shock, or some primal survival instinct telling me not to make any sudden moves." My hands were shaking as I put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. The streets were nearly empty at this hour. We drove in silence, the figure in my backseat remaining perfectly still. The only sound was my own breathing, which seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. "Turn here," they said suddenly, indicating a dark side street. As we approached the turn, I saw a gas station ahead, its fluorescent lights creating a pool of harsh brightness in the night. The parking lot wasn't empty. There were a few cars getting fuel, and I could see the attendant through the window. In that moment, something snapped inside me. Without thinking, I slammed on the brakes, threw the car into park, and launched myself out the door, screaming for help at the top of my lungs. The gas station attendant came running out, phone already in hand. 2 other customers turned to look. I was pointing at my car, trying to explain about the person in my backseat, but when we looked, the backseat was empty. We searched the entire area. The attendant even reviewed the security footage, which showed me pulling into the gas station alone. There was no sign that anyone else had ever been in my car. I spent hours with the police that night, trying to explain what had happened. They were sympathetic but confused. The security cameras showed no one entering or leaving my car. There were no fingerprints, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe the stress of working late nights had finally gotten to me. But I know what I saw. Those eyes in my rearview mirror were real. That voice telling me to drive was real. I quit the delivery job that night. Sold my car too. Couldn't stand to be in it anymore. These days, I take the bus everywhere, even though it means my commute is 3 times longer. Sometimes, when I'm riding at night, I'll catch a glimpse of someone in the reflection of the window. Someone wearing a dark hoodie, sitting unnaturally still. I always get off at the next stop when that happens, even if it means walking miles out of my way. Because I know now that some passengers aren't looking for a ride to any place on this earth. It's been 3 months, and I still check my backseat every time I get into any car. I still have nightmares about those bloodshot eyes in my rearview mirror. And I still wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't seen that gas station? Or was this thing trying to make me drive too? Some questions are better left unanswered. But one thing's for certain, I'll never do delivery work again. The extra money isn't worth discovering what else might be waiting in the dark, looking for a ride to somewhere unknown. I'm still trying to process what happened just hours ago. Let me start by explaining that I'm an avid player of Shadowhunt. It's this augmented reality game where you capture mythical creatures that appear in the real world through your phone's camera. If you're not familiar with AR games, imagine looking at the world through your phone and seeing magical creatures overlaid on reality. Living in a major European city means fierce competition for the best hunting spots. These are special locations in the game where rare creatures spawn, usually around landmarks or monuments. The thing is, these spots reset at midnight, and the rarest creatures tend to appear in the early morning hours. That's why I sometimes go hunting at 3 in the morning. I know it sounds crazy, but in a crowded city, these quiet hours are often the only time you can claim prime hunting spots without competition. I've been doing this for months, and until tonight, the scariest thing I'd encountered was a startled cat. The winter night was particularly cold, and my breath created small clouds in the air as I walked. I was wearing my usual hunting gear, warm coat, thermal gloves, the special ones that work with touchscreens, and a scarf. My phone's screen glowed softly as I tracked my way to the first hunting spot. I reached my first target, an old church with a particularly active spawn point. The game showed several common creatures, but I was after something specific, a legendary shadow beast that only appears during the new moon. As I was checking the spawn rates, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the empty street before darkness reclaimed it. That's when I noticed something odd in my phone's camera view. Beyond the game's interface, past the animated creatures, there was a figure standing at the edge of the church grounds. At first, I thought it was another player. We tend to recognize each other, even at this hour. But something felt off. The figure was unusually tall, probably over 6 feet, and seemed to be swaying slightly despite the complete absence of wind. I lowered my phone, thinking it might be a visual glitch in the game. But the figure was still there in reality, only now it seemed closer. My heart started racing, but I tried to stay calm. This was probably just another late-night wanderer, maybe someone heading home from a late shift. I raised my phone again, partly to check the game, partly to have my screen's light as protection against the darkness. Through my phone's camera, I watched in horror as the figure moved. Not walked, not stepped, moved. It was like watching a glitch in reality. The way it seemed to shift position without passing through the space between. One moment it was near the church, the next it was halfway to me. I took a step back and the figure stopped. In the game's interface, all the creatures had vanished, something that wasn't supposed to happen. The screen showed nothing but the empty street and the figure, now alarmingly close. That's when it turned its head at an impossible angle, well beyond what a human neck could manage. I could see its face through my phone screen, or rather, where its face should have been. Instead, there was just smooth, pale skin, like an unfinished sculpture. My body reacted before my mind could process what I was seeing. I turned and ran, not caring about direction or destination. Behind me, I heard something that might have been footsteps, but they sounded wrong, too many of them, too quick, too irregular. I made the mistake of looking back through my phone's camera. The figure was following, but not by running. It moved like a time-lapse video, jerking forward in sudden bursts of motion. Each time I blinked, it was closer. Ahead, I saw the welcoming glow of a 24-hour convenience store. I sprinted toward it, my lungs burning in the cold air. Just before I reached the store's light, I felt something brush against my jacket. A touch so cold it burned through the fabric. I burst through the store's doors, gasping for breath. The teenage clerk looked up from his phone, startled by my entrance. When I turned to look outside, there was nothing there. Just an empty street and the quiet of a winter night. My phone was dead, not just out of battery, but completely unresponsive. When I finally got home and managed to charge it, the game wouldn't load. Every time I try to open it, the screen goes black and the app crashes. I've uninstalled and reinstalled the game several times, but it still won't work. Part of me is relieved. I don't think I want to see what might appear through my phone's camera anymore. Reality has enough horrors without adding an augmented layer. The strange thing is, when I checked my game profile on my laptop later, it showed my last captured creature as something that isn't supposed to exist in the game. A tall, faceless figure worth an impossible number of points. I've deleted the game now. Some high scores aren't worth the price of admission. And if you ever find yourself playing AR games in the dead of night, remember, not everything that appears on your screen is part of the game. Sometimes reality glitches too, and what you see through your phone's camera might be looking back at you. This story is a warning about trusting your instincts, even when everyone around you seems fine. Back in 2004, I was 15 and working weekends at the local extreme sports center. It was one of those indoor facilities with ramps for skateboarding, BMX tracks, and a climbing wall. The place would host competitions and rock concerts on weekends, making it the coolest hangout spot in our small town. I was the only female employee there, which I later realized wasn't a coincidence. The center was owned by two men in their 40s, Robert and Keith. Robert was the business-minded one, always serious, married with kids, and constantly working on plans to expand the facility. Keith was different, single, more laid back, always cracking jokes and running errands. At first, they both seemed perfectly normal. The warning signs started small, so small I almost missed them. During one of our weekend competitions, when the place was packed with kids and parents, Keith suddenly appeared behind me while I was talking to my friend Katie. Without warning, he picked me up, spun me around, and started tickling me. I laughed it off at the moment, but something felt wrong. A 40-something man shouldn't be that physical with a 15-year-old employee. More red flags appeared over the next few weeks. Keith would give me strange looks, stick his tongue out playfully, or wink at me when no one was watching. I tried to convince myself he was just being friendly, that I was overreacting. Then came the incident that changed everything. Keith called me into the equipment room while Robert was busy at the front desk. As soon as we were alone, he cornered me against the wall and told me he wanted to kiss me. When I refused, he tried to convince me to lift my shirt. I was terrified, but managed to firmly say no. Just then, Robert opened the door and asked what we were doing. Keith smoothly replied, "Just showing her where we keep the new safety gear." I practically ran out of the room, my heart pounding. The rest of the day was tense, but I couldn't wait to leave. Around 5 o'clock, Robert asked me to go with Keith to pick up some supplies. Despite every instinct screaming at me not to go, I felt trapped. How could I refuse without explaining why? The drive started normally enough, but then Keith pulled into the parking lot of my high school. It was Saturday, and the place was deserted. When I asked what we were doing there, he said he was scouting locations for a new facility. My blood ran cold when he got out of the car and motioned for me to follow. He led me toward the back of the school, talking about his vision for a new sports center. Then we approached the woods, not just a few trees, but dense forest. "Take my hand," he said. "I'll show you the perfect spot." In that moment, time seemed to freeze. My mind raced through horrible possibilities of what might happen if I followed him into those woods. Thankfully, my phone rang at that exact moment. It was my mom, asking if she could pick me up early for dinner. I've never been so relieved to hear her voice. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady but urgent. "I'm at the high school. Come get me now." My mom must have heard the fear in my voice because she arrived in record time. During those endless minutes of waiting, Keith tried to convince me to follow him into the woods, becoming increasingly agitated when I refused. When I saw my mom's car approaching, I practically sprinted to it. I never went back to work after that. I didn't explain anything to anyone. I just disappeared from that job, blocked the center's number, and tried to forget it ever happened. 2 years later, I received a strange call from Keith. He said he was in Bangkok, Thailand, opening a new extreme sports facility there. I hung up immediately and changed my number. Looking back now, as a mother of a 12-year-old daughter, I'm horrified at how many warning signs I ignored, how many red flags I explained away, because I didn't want to seem rude or cause trouble. I teach my daughter to trust her instincts, to never worry about being polite when she feels unsafe. I've often wondered what happened to Keith. Did Robert ever discover his true nature? Did he really flee to Thailand? And if so, why? The thought that keeps me up at night is wondering if there were other girls, other victims who might not have been as lucky as I was. The center closed down a few years after I left. I drive past the abandoned building sometimes, its windows boarded up, graffiti covering its walls. It stands as a reminder that predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like friendly people in positions of authority. Sometimes they hide behind jokes and smiles, counting on our politeness and fear of making a scene to keep us quiet. To any young person reading this, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't worry about being nice. Don't worry about making things awkward. Your safety is more important than anyone's feelings. I wish someone had told me that when I was 15. I need to share this story to reclaim control over my narrative. What started as a typical university experience turned into 2 years of psychological torture that still haunts me today. When I arrived at the International Student Dormitory to begin my master's program, I met my roommates in our shared apartment. Amanda was outgoing and artistic, while twins Jessica and Emma were both pre-med students with perfectly coordinated schedules. They warned me about the 4th resident in room D, but I dismissed their concerns as typical dormitory drama. I knocked on room D's door, wanting to include everyone in our first dinner together. The door opened slightly, revealing a small woman with long black hair and unusually pale skin. Her name was Ruby, and when I invited her to join us, her face lit up with an intensity that should have been my first warning. During dinner, I learned that Ruby and I were in the same program. She barely spoke, instead watching me with unwavering attention. I attributed her behavior to shyness and decided to take her under my wing. Looking back, I realized this was my first mistake. The first signs were subtle. Ruby would open her door exactly when I opened mine, asking where I was going. She began sitting next to me in every class, though she never took notes or participated. She just watched me. One day, I noticed a sickly sweet smell coming from her room, like rotting fruit mixed with something worse. Our food started spoiling unusually quickly, and flies appeared despite the winter weather. Amanda mentioned seeing Ruby walking through the campus woods at 3 in the morning, spinning in circles and talking to herself. When we confronted her about the smell, Ruby just stared, her head tilted at an unnatural angle before retreating to her room. That night, I heard scratching sounds through our shared wall, followed by what sounded like children's nursery rhymes being hummed in a discordant key. Things escalated rapidly. During a study session, Ruby told me she could hear all my phone conversations through the wall. "You talk to your mother every day at 6, she said, smiling. "You're like a mother to me, but I'm your sister too. We're family now." When I declined her invitation to visit a cemetery at midnight, she began following me everywhere. She would appear in places she shouldn't have known I'd be, always watching with those unblinking eyes. The bathroom incident marked a turning point. I opened the door one morning to find every surface covered in red handprints. The sink, mirrors, walls, all marked with small, precise prints that couldn't have been made with paint. Ruby had stuffed the shower drain with papers covered in spiral drawings and what looked like mathematical equations. During an exam period, Ruby's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would sit 10 seats away from me in lectures, staring without blinking for hours. One day, while walking with my friend Rachel, Ruby jumped out from behind a tree and grabbed Rachel's throat. She let go immediately, but her eyes held no recognition of what she'd done. The university's response was inadequate. Despite photographic evidence, witness statements, and documentation of dozens of incidents, they only issued a no-contact order. They refused to tell me what Ruby had said in her defense, but insisted she had no malicious intent. Ruby began stalking other students, and her new roommates started showing the same fear I recognized in myself. She would violate the no-contact order daily, appearing in hallways, standing next to me in lines, following me between classes. Each report to the university was met with the same response. "We'll remind her of the no-contact order." The psychological impact was devastating. I developed severe anxiety, jumping at shadows, checking behind doors, and avoiding social situations. My grades suffered, but worse was the constant fear, the knowledge that at any moment Ruby might be watching. The end came unexpectedly. Ruby failed her second year and didn't appear in the graduation ceremony. But the damage was done. Years later, I still struggle with trust issues and anxiety. Every time I meet someone new, I watch for signs I learned to recognize too late. I've always wondered if I could have prevented this by being less friendly at the beginning, by trusting my instincts when they first whispered that something was wrong. The university's failure to protect its students still angers me, but I've learned valuable lessons about boundaries and self-advocacy. Last week, Ruby tried to connect with my professional social media account. The old fear returned instantly, but this time I knew what to do. I blocked her, documented everything, and reminded myself that I'm stronger now. To anyone experiencing something similar, Document everything, trust your instincts, and don't let anyone minimize your fear. Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding under our beds, but the ones sitting next to us in class, wearing human faces and smiling empty smiles. I still have nightmares about those 2 years, but sharing this story helps. It reminds me that I survived, that I'm not crazy, and that my experiences matter. To the university administrators who failed to protect me, your inaction enabled 2 years of terror. To Ruby, I hope you got the help you needed, but I never want to see you again. The hardest lesson I learned was that sometimes the system designed to protect you will fail, and you have to protect yourself. I'm not the same person who walked into that dormitory years ago. I'm warier, yes, but also stronger. I know now that being kind doesn't mean ignoring red flags, and that someone else's mental health struggles don't obligate me to endanger my own well-being. Some wounds heal, but they leave scars that remind us to be careful, to be strong, and most importantly, to trust ourselves when something feels wrong. Growing up, the Miller family gatherings were legendary in our small Colorado town. We would rent out the old community center, a grand building with wooden beams and high windows, where generations of families would come together. I remember those gatherings vividly, even though I was young at the time. The smell of freshly baked bread would always fill the air, a testament to my great-grandfather Winston's lifelong passion. Winston and Rose Miller weren't just any ordinary couple. They were the heart of our family. Back during the Great Depression, they ran a secret bakery from their basement in Denver. While most people were struggling to put food on their tables, my great-grandparents were quietly providing bread to those who couldn't afford it, often accepting whatever people could give in return, sometimes nothing at all. Their legacy continued through the years, and I was fortunate enough to witness their 75th wedding anniversary celebration in that same community center. The walls echoed with stories of their past, tales of how Winston would wake up at 3 in the morning to start baking, and how Rose would secretly distribute bread to families in need. But life has a way of changing things. After the authorities started investigating unauthorized food businesses in Denver, the family packed up everything and moved to a small town near Aspen. It was the perfect place to start fresh, with its tight-knit community and snow-capped mountains providing a picturesque backdrop to their new life. Years later, both Winston and Rose found themselves in Mountain View Care Home. The staff had to separate them because Winston, even in his 80s, would sneak out to the local bakery, claiming he needed to check their sourdough technique. Rose would get upset, saying he was too old to be wandering around in the cold mountain air. Their playful bickering became a regular source of entertainment for the nursing staff. Rose passed away first. I wasn't allowed to attend the funeral. My parents thought I was too young to understand death. They later admitted their mistake when Winston asked about my absence. We had always shared a special bond, perhaps because I was the only one who would sit for hours listening to his stories about different types of flour and the art of perfect bread making. A few months after Rose's passing, Margaret, one of the nurses, and her assistant Alice went to check on Winston. They'd been monitoring him closely since he'd started spending more time alone after Rose's death. That evening, as Margaret entered the room, Alice remained by the doorway. Winston was sitting on the edge of his bed, looking at the old wooden rocking chair that Rose used to love. It was having what appeared to be an animated conversation. Margaret, concerned, asked him who he was talking to. "Rose is right there," Winston said, pointing to the empty rocking chair. "Look at her, still beautiful as the day I met her. Imagine that, 12 children, more grandchildren than I can count, and 76 years of marriage. She's the only woman who ever caught my eye." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. The same couple who used to argue about Winston's bakery adventures was now the subject of his loving monologue. She gently reminded him, "Winston, Rose passed away 4 months ago." He turned to her with clear eyes and a peaceful smile. "I know that, dear. I was at her funeral, but she's here now." He looked back at the rocking chair and nodded slowly. "Rose says it's time to go check on that bread in the oven." With those words, Winston closed his eyes and slipped away peacefully. As Margaret rushed to check his vital signs, Alice, still standing at the door, witnessed something extraordinary. The old wooden rocking chair began to move, as if someone had just stood up from it. Years later, my great-aunt ended up in the same care home. Alice still worked there, and one day she shared this story with me. She said that at first, she thought it was just a sweet old man remembering his beloved wife. But when she saw that rocking chair move on its own, she realized there was more to life and death than she had ever imagined. Thank you for spending this time with Brad Arrows. We hope the stories whispered through the rain carried you far into your imagination or your dreams. If you're still awake, let us know how you liked the journey. Until next time, stay safe, sleep well, and let the darkness comfort you.